Apple just released the new M2 chip with the brand new M2 MacBook Air and M2 MacBook Pro, but we're already focused on what's next, and you may want to delay your purchase of these laptops even though the M2 MacBook Air looks great, because if they don't fit exactly what you wanted out of your next Mac, well, then you shouldn't settle for anything less. And if you are hoping for a bigger laptop, or maybe even a smaller laptop, I think I have some good news for you today. Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and yeah, we've been talking about the new M2 Macs a lot this week, so let's take a nice Saturday break, or if it's not Saturday and you're watching this, hey, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching and coming in late. It's okay, I appreciate you. But let's discuss what seems to be a very reputable report from Mark Gurman, and guess what? He pretty much gave us all the accurate details surrounding this last launch of the M2 MacBook. So this report accuracy is likely to be very high, and that is that Apple is working on developing two new MacBook models that would be new additions to the Mac lineup and actually may help fix the currently disjointed Mac lineup. That would be the addition of two new MacBooks, with an M2 15-inch MacBook Air and an even smaller laptop than the MacBook Air, with a return to the smaller size 12-inch MacBook, but powered by modern Apple Silicon hardware that would really make this the first ultra-portable Mac since they discontinued that small size laptop in 2019. Alright, first let's talk about that larger size 15-inch version of the M2 MacBook Air, because in my recent videos covering this new 13.6-inch MacBook Air, I saw a lot of comments mentioning how they were disappointed by the announcement, and what they really wanted was a larger laptop at a more reasonable price point. Well, this leak is for you, because according to Mark Gurman, Apple is working on what he called a wider version of the 13.6-inch MacBook Air, with a new MacBook Air that would have a 15-inch display size. Gurman says that Apple planned to initially launch a 15-inch size version of the MacBook Air at this last event, but shelved those plans to just focus on launching the 13.6-inch model, which I think was probably a lot to do with the supply chain shortages. Apple just wanted to make sure that they could get this one model off the ground. But because Apple was already planning on releasing a 15-inch model, it may be further in development than some of these initial leaks we usually get. And because of that, Mark Gurman says there's even a chance that we could see this 15-inch version of the MacBook Air launched as early as spring of 2023. Now, I know talking about spring in June sounds really far off, but if that's accurate, it could be at Apple's March event, and that would be less than a full year away. Now, launching a bigger size version of the MacBook Air makes all sorts of sense to me. Don't forget, the MacBook Air used to be offered in two different sizes. One with a 13-inch display, much like we have today, but then an even smaller version with an 11-inch display. In fact, the 11-inch MacBook Air was the entry-level model to get users into using a Mac, and it was just a really teeny tiny laptop. However, now many people view the 13-inch display size of the current Air as too small, and they have been asking for a larger display entry-level model for quite some time. Currently, the only big screen laptop option for a MacBook is the 16-inch MacBook Pro, but that is a laptop designed for pro users and comes with a lot of power that, quite frankly, most users do not need, and is designed to be thicker and heavier for professionals who don't mind the added weight if it means more performance. A 15-inch MacBook Air would be the perfect laptop choice for users that want a larger display but don't want to carry around a heavier laptop and definitely don't want to pay a heftier price tag. It makes even more sense when Apple just announced at their last event that the MacBook Air is the #1 best-selling laptop in the world. It's very likely that a bigger size version of the MacBook Air would be the second best-selling laptop in the world. Furthermore, a 15-inch MacBook Air could even come with some upgrades over the 13-inch version. For example, when Apple had the 13 and 11-inch MacBook Air, the bigger size 13-inch model shipped with an SD card slot, so perhaps Apple could do something similar and give us an additional SD card slot option on that larger MacBook Air. I also think this laptop could help Apple out with their confusing Mac lineup. Right now, the new entry-level lineup is way too confusing, with users basically having to choose between two 13-inch size laptops with the new MacBook Air and the somewhat new M2 MacBook Pro. A 15-inch version of the MacBook Air could take the spot of the M2 MacBook Pro and make that entry-level lineup much more cohesive. As for a price target, I think based on the current M2 MacBook Air pricing, this 15-inch version could be a $200 or $300 premium, depending on how Apple lays out the default specs. For example, I actually think the 15-inch version of the MacBook Air wouldn't come with any binned M2 chip options. I think it would just come with the full M2 chip with all 10 GPU cores enabled, because when you look at the 16-inch MacBook Pro, that doesn't have any bin chip options either. So looking at the MacBook Air, that's a $100 upgrade. And then you figure on the bigger display. Well, if you look at the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, that is a $200 upgrade on the Pro model. So I would just kind of take that same pricing structure. And if you look at a similarly spec'd out 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro, really the only difference there is that $200 price point. With that in mind, the 15-inch MacBook Air could occupy a price point of around $1,499. And because it's a bigger size laptop, it could also have some exclusive benefits over the 13-inch Air. So we mentioned ports before, but also, because it's a bigger laptop, it would have even more battery life. And with more internal space in the laptop, Apple could even make the speakers slightly better, like they do on the larger 16-inch MacBook Pro. I really think that a thinner and lighter 15-inch laptop in a MacBook Air style would be a really great selling Mac for Apple. Let me know in the comments below if you would plan on picking one up, and if this actually impacts your purchasing decision of the new 13-inch M2 model. All right, now bigger isn't always better for everyone, because I personally was a little disappointed with the M2 MacBook Air announcement, because the rumors for a while were telling us it was going to carry a smaller physical footprint, and that was not true. In fact, the new M2 MacBook Air has a slightly larger footprint over its predecessor. I thought the M2 MacBook Air was going to be in between the M1 design and the 12-inch MacBook, offering a smaller laptop that weighed much less, focusing more on ultra portability. So I was sad to see that this really wasn't the case. However, there may be hope, because Gurman also says that the idea of the ultra portable MacBook, like that 12-inch MacBook, is not dead, and Apple is planning a release of an even smaller MacBook with a 12-inch size. Now, there's very little details on what this 12-inch MacBook could be, but I think we could at least expect it to be as thin as the current M2 MacBook Air, which is quite thin. Then borrowing the frontal design with smaller bezels, I imagine this would be around the same weight as the older Intel 12-inch MacBook, which weighed, get this, just 2 pounds. Yeah, that MacBook was even lighter than the 11-inch iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard accessory attached. I don't think many people understand just how light and portable that MacBook was. But if you've ever owned one, you know exactly what I am talking about. That thing felt like a feather in your bag, and it was just so easy to pick up and carry with you. It was a really good design, despite all of its flaws. Also, it's time for Apple to get back and start doing some more of these bleeding edge designs. I feel like the current laptops are great, but they really have been conservative with their design language. Apple was always known to make thinner and lighter products until they ran into that thermal wall in the Mac lineup. But that thermal wall isn't necessarily a problem for them anymore, because one of the big weaknesses of those Intel MacBooks was that they weren't very powerful. But with Apple Silicon, Apple has a chance to finally get this design right with making a smaller MacBook that wouldn't have to sacrifice on performance. But one question does remain for me about this rumor of a 12-inch MacBook, and that is, how would it fit into the lineup? When the 12-inch MacBook launched, it was a more premium option that sat in between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. Would a new 12-inch Apple Silicon laptop fill that same gap, or with the new M2 MacBook Air pricing, is it too much to hope that this could actually be a new entry-level MacBook that eventually replaces the M1 MacBook Air at the $1,000 price point? I think that would be the ideal scenario. Well, it looks like Apple will have plenty of time to figure that out, because according to Gurman, this Mac is not scheduled to arrive until the end of 2023 or even early 2024. So forget being an M2 Mac. This could perhaps be one of Apple's first M3 Macs built on that smaller 3nm process. But perhaps that is a video for another day. But yeah, let me know, what do you think about these new rumored MacBook options? Would you be in the market for either a larger 15-inch MacBook Air or a smaller 12-inch MacBook? Or do you plan on buying one of the new M2 MacBooks that Apple just announced? So let me know in the comments below, and hey, if you like this video, don't forget to give me a like. If you want to see even more, make sure you're subscribed. M2 MacBook Air review next month, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Peace.